All right, let's explore the implications. Economist Dawie Rood joins us now live via Skype. Dawie, good afternoon. Good to speak with you. What were the main drivers? Let's start with the fourth quarter last year. What were the main drivers?
Good afternoon to you. So the South African economy, or certain sectors in the South African economy, can be quite volatile. So maybe one or two sectors that I think stood out certainly is the agricultural sector that reported some improvement in the fourth quarter, but for the year in a total, the agricultural sector did not do that well in South Africa. Something else that I'm a little bit concerned about, if you look at the overall economy, is that we are very good at importing into South Africa, but we are not very good at exporting from South Africa. And the last point that I think, or perhaps the second last point that I think is important to make, is that the state itself has been growing quite fast, and especially in the fourth quarter, we see a marked increase in the state's contribution to the economy as well. And maybe a last point that is also worth mentioning is that investments in the South African economy, which can be seen as a kind of demand in the economy, has been on a downward trajectory recently. And that is something that the President has been quite concerned about as well, that we need more investment in the economy, and that certainly is not happening at the moment.
Okay, now when you speak about exports, that obviously speaks to the manufacturing sector as well, which also speaks in a way to investment as well. Have we been struggling to grow our manufacturing sector?
Certainly. You're actually touching on the important point about getting the South African economy to grow. We need to invest in South Africa if we really want to grow the economy. It's not only manufacturing, but manufacturing is an excellent example. Manufacturing is one of those sectors in the economy that can potentially create a lot of jobs in the South African economy. Fortunately, we saw some improvement in manufacturing by the end of this year, but I'm afraid the longer-term trajectory of the manufacturing sector in South Africa is not very good. And it's not only because of investments in manufacturing, it's also got to do with things like, for example, labor relations as an example, and of course the accessibility or the reliability of electricity in the South African economy. That is a major factor that is putting a hamper on economic growth in South Africa, and that's simply the availability of electricity.
Now, Dawie, overall, okay, the figures for the fourth quarter was pleasing, it was good, but overall growth of only 0.8% for the whole of 2018. How does that compare when we look at what's happening in Africa and emerging markets as a whole?
Well, overall emerging markets, I had a look at what emerging markets have been doing. Overall economic growth globally is slowing down. So South Africa is pretty much in good company. Many economies or economic growth is slowing down, also in the emerging economies. Unfortunately, in the case of South Africa, the rest of the emerging world is actually still growing at a much faster rate than South Africa. So on a per capita basis, South Africa is actually, in a way, or the rest of the emerging economies are actually catching up quite fast with South Africa, including Sub-Saharan Africa, which is the poorest region in the world. What is certainly clear is that although last year, if you look at the numbers of last year, we started off the year in a recession, the economy was actually getting smaller, it was contracting. The second half of the year certainly was much better, but this is not nearly good enough. We need to grow this economy just to remain where we are on a per capita GDP basis. We need to grow this economy at least 2%, and we are very, very far away from that.
Okay, Dawie, let's look at the effect that maybe politics can have on the economy. We've got all these, inquiries taking place at the present moment. It's public, it's on television. What does this do in terms of investor confidence or business confidence?
Yeah, business confidence or confidence in the South African economy, confidence in the political leadership is the first step in getting the economy to grow. If you can have all your economic variables pointing in the right direction, but if people do not have confidence in the economy, they're simply not going to invest. And if you look at the different indices that measure confidence in South Africa, that is certainly not where we want it to be. So unfortunately, we're probably not going to see a huge spike for investments in South Africa, and that's not painting a very pretty picture for economic growth going forward in South Africa. I also think that perhaps the uncertainty around the election, and this is normal, the uncertainty around the election is also weighing on sentiment in the short term. So perhaps the answer is that we need to wait until after the elections, and maybe there will be a bit of an improvement in sentiment there.
Okay, is the business sector over the Ramaphosa now?
Yeah, certainly it is. It is over the Ramaphosa, and you can see that in all sort of things. The rand is under pressure, the bond market is under pressure, and I think there's reason for the business sector to be concerned about South Africa's future. If we listen to the budget of the Minister of Finance, there are many reasons to be extremely concerned about on the fiscal accounts, as an example, and we've got some policy issues that are certainly of concern. Things like, for example, expropriation, the nationalization of the Reserve Bank, prescribed assets in the manifesto of the ANC. Those sort of things are certainly not good when it comes to confidence.
Yep, the mining charter as well. Dawie Rood, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
All right.